Hi everyone, Lori Flasco here. I speak about kindness and the kindness advantage and have the privilege of speaking to people around the world about what they're doing to make a difference. And today I have the privilege of speaking with Christy Scarrow. And Christy is the partner at Lighthouse NINE Group and a certified executive coach. She has worked with all kinds of different organizations, ranging from real giants to small not-for-profits, but she has a background in market research, sales, and marketing, and had worked for companies like Nortel Networks, Revlon, and Mars. And I just love, Christy, this tagline. Christy helps individuals, teams, and organizations to make decisions that count, and how critically important that is today. So welcome, Christy. So glad to have you with us today.
Thank you, Lori. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really, proud to be a part of your kindness journey, which has been very inspirational.
And you have been right from the start, which we'll talk about that in a minute, but you have some exciting things on the horizon. You have a brand new book coming out, The Truth Warriors, and I think it's coming out in April of 2021. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Can just give us a snippet, because we want to go into a little bit more about it, but tell us what the book is about.
Yeah, it's really about, I said, making decisions count, but even more so, it's about how do we challenge our beliefs and believe in ourselves, but question everything, with the goal of, recognizing truths are different for everybody. And as a warrior, it's about how to battle to find truths amongst ourselves and bring people closer together.
Wow, amazing. And, I think you talk about things like conflict style and decision-making style. And when we look at the world today, there's so much going on, and so much, whether it's fear and impatience, and just people don't know how to handle conflict.
Exactly.
Right?
And I think that was one of the inspirations of the book. And I knew decision making was key for me. It's something I do in my work, but the conflict side of it, and I know conflict obviously comes out as a negative concept for many. But I read a book by Leanne Davies called The Good Fight, which is all about productive conflict. And for me, she tells people about how to embrace conflict in the workplace. And I thought that in addition to that, I think it's really about finding the balance between conflict to again, bring better connection and make better decisions. So, and that might mean in some cases, you need to be more assertive in how you work with people. In some places, you need to actually be less assertive. So I look to the balance between being conflict averse and conflict aggressive, and trying to find the balance of those in order to challenge our own beliefs and make better decisions.
I really like that, because, I can see myself, depending on the situation, be one or the other, and just so important to be able to, and we want to do it right, but sometimes we don't know how. So very important issues today, and to have really good, healthy conflict. Now, I was very fortunate that I had a chance to look at your book ahead of time. And one area that I really want to talk about today is around how important it is to be kind, not nice. And, that intrigued me. So let's dig into that a little bit deeper, but start out by telling us the story that you share in the book about your coworker, Linda.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is a situation I think many people find themselves in. And for me, it was one of those first challenging moments in my career. And, I was part of a team, and Linda was our leader. And, I'd worked with her in the past, had a lot of respect for her. I worked really well, more so as a peer than actually as a leader. And then as the leader of our team, what we found was happening is she, we were having struggles with her. She may have been somewhat disorganized. She wasn't sending us all the information we needed. And as a result, what started to happen is what I call triangulation, and, sort of side conversations and all of that. And it was sort of easy to go to this complaint of like, what is she doing? And, frustrations. And we were venting our frustrations to one another as a team, but I'd say behind her back, which was really unfair. And I was really I think at the time maybe didn't react as positively, but looking back, what happened is one of the other colleagues on the team walked into a side conversation and he challenged us on it. And he said, have you brought these up to Linda? Does she know what you're frustrated by? And we were like, well, she's doing the best she can and we don't want to hurt her feelings. And we want to, it's not, we're trying to complain amongst ourselves to protect her. And he challenged us to say, are you really protecting her? By not telling her. I mean, this was Linda's first opportunity really to lead this group, and she's going to be doing it more. So you need to let her know. And so, I would say I kind of stumbled through that. I agreed with him. He had the right perspective, and I did talk to Linda. And I think what the learning was for me is I had positive intent. And that for me is a bit about being kind versus nice. And it's not to suggest we shouldn't be nice to people or polite, but sometimes that desire not to hurt people, I think, really holds us back from telling people what they need to hear to help them for the positive purpose of having them develop. And it's much harder to give people we like hard feedback, for sure. And I think that's one of the hardest things that managers and leaders have to deal with, and even peers within their own teams. It's really being able to give feedback, but also equally, obviously being open to that feedback, because that makes it easier. And I have a partner in my group who taught me this lesson, and he came and joined us after I'd been a partner for a couple of years. And he said, at the end of our first meeting, he had extensive experience, led companies across the world, general manager. And for me, I was almost a little intimidated working with him, brought him into a client. The two of us ran the session quite well. And at the end of it, he said, how did that go? Was I okay? What do you think they're saying? Like, he just asked for my feedback. And I was almost surprised that he was asking for my feedback, but that allowed me to be honest about what I liked, obviously, and what I thought went really well, and maybe some guidelines, because he was newer to this particular experience, despite all his experience. So I think that idea of being kind is about that, is about being willing to, one, ask for feedback, which makes it easier, and share feedback.
Wow. Okay. What a rich conversation. There's so much I want to go back and dig into a bit more. But when I'm speaking also about kindness and leadership, kindness is not sweeping things under the carpet. That's poor management. It's the way that you deal with those situations that brings in the kindness, right? And I think that's what you're talking about. And you're talking about the intentions, and you had really good intentions. And we don't want to hurt people, but that's not necessarily being kind. So the individual, you said he was a new teammate, right? He came in. What a brave person, first of all, he was, to jump in and to call you guys out on some of the behaviors that weren't, one, helpful to the team, and also fair to your leader. So what courage for him to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the concept in my book. And that's really, I think, important to encourage people, is that bravery side of things. It takes bravery to have these difficult conversations. It takes courage. At the same time, it takes courage to be vulnerable and recognize that the way you're behaving may not be the right way. And I'm thankful that we didn't react negatively to him calling us out, because that would have been bad on all fronts, and maybe he wouldn't have done it again. So major lesson for me, but I absolutely agree. He was the hero in that situation in my mind, because he said, guys, you're really doing her a disservice. Yeah. And that really encouraged us to think differently.
Well, he stopped it. And then, as you said, you had to be willing to be open to hearing his message, and then also be saying, yeah, like, it's almost like reviewing your values or what's important to you, and saying, yeah, you're right. He called us out. You're right. Now what do we do? And the other piece of bravery then is for you to have a conversation with your boss. I mean, that's a hard conversation to have. And as you said, some people, they go at it and attack, and other people run away from it. We're afraid. We're afraid of what the outcome's going to be. So it took that bravery, and you have some steps that I know that can really help people that have to have those tough conversations. You want to tell us a bit about those steps?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a feedback model that we use a lot. We stole the initial concept of what's called SBI, which is the situation, the behavior, and the impact, and we've kind of layered on some other pieces. So it starts with I, which is actually what's your intent. So if you're giving somebody feedback, it does need to start with why am I giving you this feedback? What is the purpose? And so the conversation with Linda obviously started with, we really want this group to be successful. We really want you to be successful. And that set the scene, I think, from what she's about to hear is coming from a place of positive intent. And then the situation is really about what happened and what we're seeing in some of the actual behaviors. And then the implication on us is that, we're not able to offer you as much value as a team, or we're not getting the information as much time, or we're struggling to give quality work as part of that. And one of the things I do with clients when I teach this model is we really talk about judgment and, observing actual behaviors versus placing judgment. And it's really easy when we see someone behaving in a certain way to respond by saying, she is inconsiderate, or she's being rude, or she's being thoughtless. And those are all judgments we place, as opposed to in the feedback, I wouldn't want to say to her, and I'm not even, I can't say I made that conversation perfectly well when it happened, but the learning from it is, instead of saying, you're inconsiderate of us, I said, what's happening is you're not sending us information early, which is the specific observable action that she's taking, and nothing about her personally. And I think that's where, negative feedback or any sort of criticism is really obviously hard to hear from anybody. But the more you focus on the true behaviors that you're observing, as opposed to the judgment that you're placing on them as a person, obviously the easier it is to handle. So those are the big ahas for me, is thinking about how to do that. And the last part of the model is Q. So ISBIQ, Q being questioning. So this shouldn't be, any feedback conversation I have should not be about, here's what I'm going to tell you, thank you very much, goodbye. Obviously, it's meant to be an engagement. It's meant to be a discussion. It's meant to be was that your intent, or what are your thoughts, or what ways, engaging them in the solution is key. So for me, that's a model that I've tried to apply as much as possible when providing and having difficult conversations.
And, and I like, Christy, that you said too, you did this and it might not have turned out exactly right, and you learned from it. And isn't that true of all of us, right? We have those conversations, and it just how important though is to have them. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It's because your situation here with Linda actually turned out really positive.
Absolutely. And as I said, I think that the conversation I went into was challenging, and did I use the model perfectly then? No, but I think she still recognized the positive intent. Yeah. And so as you said, it was a learning opportunity for me. It inspired me again to think, Miguel, who was the one who went against, who kind of, put a stop to the conversation, taught me a lesson for sure, to think about the words in those conversations and those sidebar conversations that, it's very easy to get into those even now, where you're complaining about somebody and you realize, do they know this? Is this clear? Or someone's complaining to you about them. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking, do they know this? Have you told them? And wherever possible, I do try to challenge people to ask that question, just as I was challenged. Mm-hmm. And it, of course, it doesn't always land well. And there has to be a recognition of positive intent. But I know those conversations are very difficult for everybody, especially when you have a great respect for the person you're giving feedback to. It's almost more difficult.
Mm-hmm. So I want to come back to feedback, but I want to jump on, in the workplace today, there's so much information that shows the impact of incivility. So things like gossip, talking behind somebody's back, backstabbing. Christine Porath out of Georgetown University, she showed that when someone is exposed to rudeness, they're 3 times less likely to help, and the willingness to share drops by 50%. Like, that's incredible. So somebody finds out, or this kind of negativity, and we've seen it. It can create this downward spiral, and it just can continue. And that's a tough place to be on a team, because it just doesn't stop. Yet having that one person, or even we all do it. No one's perfect, but the awareness, and you talk about being intentional, and then having someone brave enough on the team to stop it. So I think that's great.
Yeah.
And the feedback you talked about, being open to feedback, because Linda, she listened to you, and that was key. And you also talked about the fact that there was enough built up trust there. So do you want to talk a little bit about that trust piece? Because I'm sure that's a huge part as well.
It is. And as you said, those are really interesting stats, because you're right. That's what it ends up turning into. And I think trust for me is so foundational in everything, right? It's you can't be kind if there's not some level of trust that you have my positive, you have my benefit in mind, right? You're actually doing this for my sake, not for yours, not just for yours. And that's so important. So I think trust for me is a key part of it. And I do think actually trust starts with the leader or yourself trusting somebody first. It's very easy to go to a place of non-trust, but if you start the cycle, then you're more likely to encourage people to trust you back. So I think that's sometimes very difficult, and why we get caught, and people that maybe we're butting heads with, that we think, okay, well, I don't really trust what they're up to. I don't think they have my best intentions in mind. But maybe if I allow myself to trust that they do, go back to positive intent, if I believe that where they're coming from a place of positive intent and start there, maybe I'll discover something, as opposed to going from an assumption from how they're behaving is being very thoughtless of me. So I think that's for me where trust is really an underlying, value for me in everything, because if you don't have it, and I teach sales classes, and I talk about, customers, and those are obviously very difficult situations, negotiation. There's not a lot of trust in negotiation, but it does have to exist, and it's okay if people don't like you, but they need to trust you to do business with you. So trust is very important, I think, in how we work with people, how we engage, how we build relationships, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Wow, thank you so much. There's, I can't wait to see your book, because I know conflict can be a struggle. It can be a struggle for me and others. Yet you give us some really good concrete steps to be able to work through it. So I know there's a lot more in the book than just this part. I snuck a peek at being humble and all of those great things that we should all be aware of in order to be that warrior.
Yeah.
So Christy, thank you. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I just, I really appreciate the opportunity, and I love what you're doing with kindness. And it's interesting because, for me, it is about that paradox and that balance. So it's being humble and bold, and it's letting go and building up systems, and it's believing in yourself, but questioning everything. And that to me is the balance that we're all trying to find, ultimately, to better connect us. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. And I think it's amazing the work you're doing.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.